This is a Gear Network production. Coming to you live from Greece, New York, from the Gear Network studios, this is Talking Wrestling. Here is your host, JC Money. Hello everyone, and welcome to Talking Wrestling with JC Money. I am your host, JC Money, and this week's episode is brought to you by Broken Road Entertainment's Pier 6 Wrestling live show, emanating from the Italian American Community Center in Gates, New York on Sunday afternoon, June 8th. Bell time is at 4 p.m. and it is a TV taping for Pier 6 Wrestling Shakedown, which airs Saturday nights at 1 a.m. on Rochester's CW16. Tickets are $20 for front row, $15 for general admission, and $10 for kids 12 and under. Bring the clan for a great afternoon of entertainment. That's Broken Road Entertainment. Today on the show, we have a true legend in our area, the one and only Chip Stetson. The guy means a lot to a lot of people, has influenced a lot of people, including yours truly. We are very pleased to have him as our interview this week. Because of that, and because of the anticipated length, there will be no WWE talk. Instead, I'm going to go right into some local talk here for the first portion of the show. This past week on the Take It Deep network, Tiger Smith sat down with a former friend and rival of mine, Brian Emanon, and the subject of my personal heavyweight championship run in Next Era Wrestling came up. It had been widely debated for years, and what I had heard was that Brian, as the part promoter, felt that I was not of the physical stature to be heavyweight champion. When the choices were narrowed down to either myself or some rookie as the champion, I guess they had chose the experience in me over the undeveloped mind of that rookie at the time, because according to Brian, neither of us were built as heavyweights and looked more like quote-unquote cruiserweights. I can respect that. It was an honest opinion, and I personally would rather just have it thrown out there than to be delivered a smokescreen of BS only to find through a middleman one's true feelings. Seems to be a lost art when it comes to wrestling on the independent level, which has been one of my gripes with it. I know far too many people that fit the category of smoke blower, and then behind the scenes they'll say whatever they feel is the popular choice at that time. I've said that the fakest part of the professional wrestling is some of the people involved, and I'm very fortunate to have eliminated that portion of the business from my life, as well as those particular people. So, I felt it was a breath of fresh air to hear honesty from someone other than myself, even if it was at my expense. Now, if I could be clear here, Brian's words did not upset me. I've heard and likely said far worse about myself during that period of time. For instance, I've mentioned quite often that I do not like how every single victory that I had involved some members of the cartel. I thought it was booked very poorly, and I've often said that I've disliked my run as heavyweight champion. But if I may pose the question, or questions, on the independent level, what specifically defines who is quote-unquote big enough to be the heavyweight champion? Is there such things as quote-unquote cruiserweights on this level particularly, when the average heavyweight is at or around 201 pounds? I'm curious because it seems to be the way some folks continue to think, and as a smaller performer myself, I happen to fundamentally disagree with that notion. No, I'm not disagreeing because of my size, because I'm 5'6" and 185 pounds. At my heaviest, I was 202 pounds, and I was the NEW champion at the time. I'm disagreeing because I believe that the debate on who looks which part is a generational issue, limited to specific eras and time, and as these eras have changed, so too have the looks and what the fans actually want to see. For example, in the 70s, you had the big burly guys with the chest hair and the pot bellies. In the 80s, it was the muscle-bound guys like Hulk Hogan, Don Morocco, the Ultimate Warrior. In the 90s is when it began to slim down, especially because of the steroid controversy. So the Bret Harts and the Shawn Michaels of the world carried the company, while there were still giants like The Undertaker and Kane and The Big Show, who was known as simply The Giant in WCW at that time. It was in the 2000s, though, where you had guys like Jeff Hardy and CM Punk, who were smaller than the Austin and Rocks before them, and mind you, Austin and Rock were smaller than the Hogans and the Warriors before them. In Punk's case, he was the longest reigning WWE champion of the past 2 decades at the tender weight of 219 pounds. This takes us to today, where a 190-pound guy won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship in the main event of the stage that the muscle-bound performers before him made famous. That's WrestleMania. The times have changed from whether or not you look the part of a stereotypical heavyweight to whether or not you can draw. Like it or not, in the bigs, the fans dictate who they want to see. In the case of Daniel Bryan, it happened organically. So the example that was given where Next Era went from Riot, a big guy, to JP Black, a big guy, to Brody Lee, a.k.a. Luke Harper, a big guy as NEW heavyweight champion to little old me is no different than having the WWE title go from John Cena to Alberto Del Rio to CM Punk to The Rock to Cena to Daniel Bryan to Randy Orton back to Daniel Bryan. It's no different than Rey Mysterio being a two-time world champion. In the bigs, Daniel Bryan and Rey Mysterio are in fact cruiserweights, which as defined by WWE at the time they had a division was a competitor that was underneath 230 pounds. So using that definition, each independent promotion, at least locally, would maybe have 3 legit heavyweights on their roster at one time and be a promotion of all cruiserweights. Perhaps that is why there aren't very many cruiserweight championships in the indies nowadays, because 80% of the roster would comprise the division, and then you'd have a very lame heavyweight championship division. This is where name positioning comes in. Instead of using the title heavyweights, cruiserweights, flyweights, anything weights in a promotion with an even average weight, what's to say that we just call the titles as they are? I'll use Next Era as an example here, since that was the topic of conversation on that show. Instead of the Next Era Wrestling Heavyweight Championship, you simply call it the Next Era Wrestling Championship. I mean, you have secondary and tag team titles that are not mentioned as weight-specific anyways, so what's the big deal about the main prize? Ego? Likely. The term heavyweight, I guess, adds a certain amount of luster to the person it is bestowed upon. Maybe it's a pride thing. No, it's just an ego thing. Either way, it was a good take on Brian's part, and I'll put this out there because we've been friends and rivals. It was nice to hear him on air. It was nice to hear that he's still alive. I do miss the guy. When we return, the man, the myth, Chip Stetson joins us on Talking Wrestling here on the Gear Radio Network, presented by Pier 6 Wrestling Live.
You're listening to Talking Wrestling and the Gear Radio Network. Good night now.
Pier 6 Wrestling presents P6W Live, the TV taping for Saturday Night Shakedown, which airs on Rochester's CW16, Saturday nights at 1 a.m. Pier 6 Wrestling Live comes to you from the Italian American Community Center on 150 Frank Domino Way in Rochester, New York, Sunday, June 8th at 4 p.m. Tickets are $15 for general admission, $20 for front row, and kids 12 and under get in for $10. Just announced for the Tag Team Championships, the champions Punisher Van Slyke and Kevin the Man Graham take on the Electric Dream Machine, Studley Steve McKenzie, and Guerrero Loco. Already scheduled to appear, heavyweight champion Super Beast with Rob Sanderson, television champion Jordan Lennox, Young Guns champion Joe O'Connor, Jay Freddy, David Fenway, the return of JC Money, and many more. Visit them on Twitter at Pier 6 Wrestling and watch Pier 6 Wrestling Saturday Night Shakedown on CW Rochester Saturdays at 1 a.m. Be there! From the Gear Network studios, once again, JC Money. Welcome back, everybody, to Talking Wrestling with JC Money here on the Gear Radio Network. And ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Much hyped, much appreciated. Joining us via the Skype technology here on Talking Wrestling with JC Money, the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, the incomparable Uncle Chip Stetson. How are you, buddy?
Good, pal. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. Thank you for joining me here.
You know, it's my pleasure, and you know what? It's funny because, like, you know how old school, like, you know me, and you know how old school I am. The fact that you've actually got me using technology for your network is got to be huge, because I am so computer illiterate, it's funny.
I know.
Illiterate, not literate, illiterate.
Computer illiterate, right? That's what you're doing. It's all right. We aim to please here on the Gear Radio Network, and of course, technology's kind of my thing, so you know it's all good. But yeah, we got you on the Skype, and I get to see your beautiful face too. It's kind of like you're in studio, except you're not. You're in wherever you are. Where are you?
I'm back home in Dwaynesburg, New York. I actually am at my parents' house because of anybody that knows me and knows my wife and my kids, there's no way I could get quietness in my house to do this with you. So I actually went to my parents' house. My mom's in the living room. Little Molly, the Yorkie poo's sitting on her pillow. My dad's outside on a rotting lawnmower, and you're drinking a beer, making me jealous.
I sure am. And I originally thought I was going to get Red's Apple Ale for you. This is an insider thing here for all you folks listening, because Chip turned me on to Red's Apple Ale.
Absolutely. Once you have one, you'll love it, and you'll have more and more and more. You can't beat the Red's Apple Ale. Strawberry's not my thing, but the red, the apple is phenomenal.
I gotta say I dig the strawberry, but I actually was stopping at the Wegmans, and I got the Woody Creek Belgian-style white IPA. And
oh my goodness,
it's pretty good. And I figured, hell, this is a hell of an occasion, so we might as well. But all right, let's
look at. Oops! It started already.
That's all right. I got F7 for you, and we got time, buddy. So, all right. Nice. First and foremost, for those maybe two people that don't know who you are that are listening to this podcast, and how could you not know Chip? First of all, if you don't, but if for those that don't know, can you explain to the listening audience what got you involved in professional wrestling? How you started? Who trained you? How you started your journey?
Yeah, we're going to go back to 1996. Maybe even 1995, I was at a WWF event at the Glens Falls Civic Center, and there was a couple of guys that I knew from Amsterdam High School, two guys that worked the indy circuits, one that still does Danger, and then another guy by the name of Johnny Kane. Well, they signed up for wrestling school in Elmira, and it was through the USWF Training Academy in Elmira, New York. And this was around the time you got to understand too, JC, where stuff that would pop us back in the day, cruiserweight wrestling was really coming into foreplay with WCW, and it was just enough that was driving everybody nuts. And they're like, Chip, you know what? You've been watching wrestling your whole life. You could do this. So I flattered it. I went out for a weekend. Met H.C. Loke for the first time ever.
I love that guy. That's my trainer, you know.
Yeah, yep.
I love that guy. Loke, if you were listening, I love you. I miss you. Get at me. We got to get you on here. Or at least just shoot the breeze and say hi.
Well, he actually, when I said I was doing this today, he was one of the first ones that, boom, liked that comment.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And we're still tight, and we touch base every now and then. Big Papa Chill was there. So, I checked out the school, and, it was for me. At the time, I was single. I obviously living home at the time, working full-time. I didn't have anything that was going to hold me down and prevent me from going to do it. And you got to understand, I'm 3.5 hours away from Elmira one way. So, there's nothing in the Albany, Schenectady area unless you wanted to go to New York City to like Johnny Rod's at Gleason's gym. Okay. And there he'll hit you for $5,000 right up front. So, that wasn't in the equation. So that's why I went the Elmira route. The guy that originally trained me, there was a couple guys named Rodney Allen and John Diamond. They were working, they went through the ECW training, the Taz's Dojo. They were known briefly as the Pittsburgh Steel Team. And if you go on YouTube, you'll see it. They didn't stick around all that long. And then T.C. Reynolds was the guy who originally took me underneath his wing. So I would usually say how T.C. Reynolds, Preston Steele, King Kalua were the three guys that put effort and time into me and the other guys out there. And there was times there was just me and Loke at the school. We were the only two down there. And just, as much as I hate to say it, and sometimes it was as seen on TV wrestling, we would see it, all right, we're going to go hit that. We're safe enough that we're not going to hurt each other, but let's see if we can do that spot and practice it, or use Chill to practice it on because he was just our big stuffed pillow.
Yeah.
Big Papa Chill, I mean, that guy would take anything. He was so crazy. I mean, he's quiet, but he's like he was like our crash test dummy. Hey, I'm going to do a moonsault off the top rope on top of you on the floor. Okay.
yeah, I've seen a few of those Chill spots. I reffed a couple of them myself in my earlier days.
Oh, yeah, but the sweetest guy, though, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind-hearted, you know what I mean? And, he's another one I wish I kept better track of. We're still friends every time we exchange pleasantries, but I don't get a chance to see him nearly as often as I'd like to.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so we got a little brief history on there. Now I'm gonna maybe skip a few years with you here to where I first came into contact with Chip Stetson. That was January of 2000 at the New Millennium Wrestling Show.
First one, right?
The very first one, right. The very first one. We didn't actually speak because I was a fan and you were the wrestler. But I think what stuck out for me was that you were especially at that time, we've all gained weight. Erosion hits us pretty bad, doesn't it? But but
baldness.
Well, I've still got a good head of hair. I'm hoping to keep that. I got a few grays now, but
you do. You wear it well though, bud.
I
got a great hairline.
I appreciate it. When you came out, it was actually you and I don't remember who you were wrestling, but when I saw you and when I saw Hellcat and when I saw Candyman, the three of you guys were rather small, comparatively speaking, to what I was used to seeing on TV. So that right there triggered the want for me. I was like, hey, maybe I could do this. So thank you for being an inspiration, first of all.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Take us through the New Millennium Wrestling years. You know, a lot of people know, a lot of old-timers know about it, know about the guy in the pink jacket, you know, Barry Hardy bailing on the school, things like that. Take us from a veteran's perspective, because the perspective that's always out there is usually that of either myself or Tiger Smith, who were the young boys at that time.
I mean, bottom line, I was never booked. This is the funny thing, out of, like, everything that's gone on, 13, 14 years of Rochester wrestling, I was never booked for that show. All right, somebody couldn't make it. Kenny Casanova and JP Black got a hold of me and said, there's this thing going on in Rochester. It's supposed to be pretty cool. You want to come out? You know, Hoss couldn't make it. And,
I remember Hoss.
Yeah. And I'm like, all right. They're like, well, Reckless Youth is going to be there. And I'm like, well, I love Tom. You know, I haven't seen Tom in a year or so because he was working some of the USWF events. And I'm like, all right, you know, Don Montoya and Reckless Youth, I'm there. You know, no problem. So I showed up, not expecting anything. And I'd only met Hellcat one other time, and he was booking for New Millennium. And I remember coming to him, and I said, you know, I'm here. I know Hoss is not in. You know, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I know this is the first show for you guys. Whatever you need me, I'm here. And you know, I always got the impression he'd probably be the first to tell you that whenever it's an undertaking, it's your first show. I had probably about, at that point, 5 years in the business, working a lot of indie promotions and a lot of the magazines around that time, carried a degree of name face value where he utilized me in the best position that he could. And he said, listen, this is a tournament for the heavyweight title. I'm going to give you a bye. I'm going to have you go over in a second and slingshot right to the finals with Jason Atlas. And please, you know, will you do a favor for me and put him over as best as you can? And I'm like, well, I knew Jason Atlas even before then. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. So just and this is a lesson for all you newbies, is, you know, putting yourself out to a promotion for the first time when they don't know who you are, and trying to help out at whatever possibility that you can help out could actually lead to 14 years worth of friendship and helping, I like to think, produce a hotbed of Western New York wrestling that we kind of have today.
I agree, and it's not even so much Western New York as much as New York in general. I mean, at one point in time, you know, going forward, and we'll get there in greater detail in a little bit. But when UPW and its former incarnation, NWA Upstate, became NWA New York, presumably because they were branching out all across New York. And but before we get there, we hit up on New Millennium. I'm going in hot tag right now already. We're going to jump right into it. 24/7 LLC. You know I was going to go there. Yes, the news there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell you how I was introduced to 24/7, and then you know, from my perspective, I was actually brought up there by Scotty Bender. I heard about the show. I wanted to go. I think you invited me once. And I couldn't make it for whatever reason, probably some stupid BS reason. And then I ended up going up with Bender. And it was, I think, in 2001 or 2002, I want to say. And I went up there, and you put me in a match with Kevin Dunn for the Cruiserweight title. First match there. Almost kind of similar to your gimmick at New Millennium. But first match there, and I was wrestling Kevin Dunn for the Cruiserweight Championship. I had never at that point wrestled outside of Rochester. I was uncomfortable as hell. And then I got there, and you made me feel welcome. You made me feel at home. Yeah. Then I met Luke.
Luke wasn't a bad kid. It was his dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kid, he really, don't get me wrong, lived a sheltered life, the only kid. You know, it's something maybe you and I, if we were I don't know if you have any other siblings, but I have other siblings, and if I was the only child that had the silver spoon in the mouth, you know, I probably would enjoy that lifestyle myself. You know?
And yes, I don't hate Luke. I couldn't do business with the guy. I couldn't do business with him again. I don't hate him, and you know, it's 10 years old now at this point, maybe even older than that now at this point. My falling out with him at 24/7, but he came up to me. I remember he was really young. I think he was like 15 or 16 at the time, and at that time I was 22 or 23. And he introduces himself as like the head trainer or assistant head trainer or something. And I looked at him and I'm like, really? So I guess my question to you is, how did that title come about? How did 24/7, from the horse's mouth, how did 24/7 start? How did Luke essentially get the position that he had?
All right, well, the only position that Luke had with that was he was senior kid of a kids program. All right, you had SPW and FSPW.
Yeah.
Future Superstars of Pro Wrestling and Superstars of Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
All right, so what started with Kenny Casanova doing a weekend thing with the underage kids to try to get them off the streets. Very, very similar to, I think, what Stu Hart did with Eric Bischoff called Mat Rats with Harry Smith and Tyson Kidd back when those guys are like, same situation, early teens where they were like phenoms in Canada learning how to work because of their family in the business. Well, I was asked to work with a bunch of young kids to try to keep them off the streets that were all wrestling fans. And I try not to look at it as breaking or giving the business away to anybody that doesn't deserve it. But at that time and the situation that those kids were in, they needed something drastically in their lives. They really did. Or they would be out there robbing, breaking into cars, and probably half of them could have even ended up in jail. So I came on in and started to train them. Almost MMA mixed with professional wrestling, collegiate, so on and so forth. And it ended up, you know, taking off. Well, obviously, Luke's father is the financial benefactor behind everything. So he's going to want the best position for his son as it possibly can be.
Right.
As much face time and training time with me. I would tell him I would write out what the agendas were to cover in the classes, go through it with Luke. He would sit in on our adult classes and then implement it into the kids' class.
Right.
Little did I realize that there was a lot of this going on in regards to, he learned politicking and it wasn't even from me.
Right.
In regards to letting his mouth overload his you-know-what. And that was probably also the downfall of him because he never was respected because of things like that. Andy was never respected. He was just looked at as a money mark and no one ever took him serious. You know, what can he and you look back in retrospect, what can he say right now, John, that, you know, what did he ever get out of it? A win out of Tony Atlas that his father had to pay $700.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I was actually going to make mention of that. Was the Tony Atlas show, and I believe that was during the time where the beginning stages of me and him kind of having a bit of a falling out, and I found myself mysteriously not booked.
And I don't know if you remember that show, if you heard about it. I'm the one who wrestled Amanda Storm, the big bull looking girl that used to drive around with Tony Atlas that would let him put her feet on his face and the whole fetish thing, but she was married too. There was some weird stuff, but she was a female worker and she wasn't bad. It was funny, you know me well, I'm not racist whatsoever, but I'll never forget at the end of that show, we're at a place called, I don't know, you guys remember Ground Round? Yeah. Ground Round out the Bayou? Okay. Yep. We're at Ground Round Restaurant. Tony Atlas says to me, look here, here, Mr. Stetson. You made Amanda look good tonight, baby. I really appreciate it. How long you been working? That was a good match, baby. And I'm saying to myself, you know, if you know how to work, you can work anybody. You know what I mean? And Amanda could work, but, you know, I just knew how to work a female.
Right.
In a male-female match. I mean, you know, it's not hard to figure.
It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science.
No, you got to understand psychology in wrestling and know how. You got to be smart enough to get yourself over. And trust me, people like Tony Atlas is smart enough to know how to get himself over without killing himself or letting a 15-year-old kid kill him. Right,
absolutely. So, all right, we're touching on 24/7. So we got
days.
Yes, the dark days. Actually, you know what? I will say for a period of time, it was not. It was a great learning experience for someone like me. I wasn't. Again, I was green as grass then, and still am to this day. I'm always going to consider myself green, whether I'm wrestling or not, because I'm always absorbing and wanting to learn. But you know, it was a great learning experience, and I can safely say that you yourself did whatever you could to take care of your talent. I knew that back then, and that's why when, you know, we had some discussions about, you know, UPW and how you run your locker rooms and everything like that. If anybody were to ever say anything, you know, about Chip Stetson, the one thing that they could say is he takes care of his guys, and he's got his I'm going to break my own code here, but I can censor myself. He's got his straight when it comes to keeping the locker room intact and putting business, you know, doing what's best for business. So I'm going to mention the Karen Clay era. Towards the end, I often make fun of this particular era because, you know, Stop the Violence sponsoring professional wrestling, and Karen Clay was at the helm with Tony Militia, and it was just a very, very odd period of time. How did that come about, and were you a big fan of it? I'm putting you on the spot. Were you a fan of it? Did you sign off on it, or was this the beginning of the end? Did you feel that?
I knew it was going to be the beginning of the end. I was against it from the very beginning, but you're also going to understand, like, I'm not the money person. All I am was the mind. Okay? And when Karen Clay came in, she floated around a lot of money. She was a not-for-profit organization. All right? And at that time, we were a licensed training school. We were not a licensed promotion.
Right. We were performing exhibitions. That I remember.
Right, and that is what saved us from the New York State Athletic Commission at that time. Okay, so that's what kept us out of harm's way.
Right,
was the not-for-profit, and donations at the door would go to the Stop the Violence organization.
Yeah,
and I knew Tony Militia from New Breed Wrestling. This is before then, okay?
I remember New Breed Wrestling.
And knowing that he was dating Karen Clay and that she was shopping for a building to have run her company out of, and how all of a sudden in a very short period of time she was interested in that building that had our school in it, you could kind of see the writing on the wall. It wasn't good. Next thing you know, she bought it. Andy went down there because the gym that was below us told us that she bought it, that she just closed on it, and her attorney served notice for eviction of the fitness gym downstairs, and that they were going to do the same thing to us upstairs and take all of our assets, which wouldn't have worked because we would have called the cops and said, all right, she bought the building and she's going to evict us the same day that she closed on it.
Yeah, it's not going to hold up in any court of law. New York State law gives you 30 days. So she wouldn't have had a pot to piss in there.
No, definitely not. And this was also the time where apparently behind the scenes, Karen Clay had gotten into the head of some of the wrestlers about leaving Andy, and subsequently me, but my name wasn't thrown through the gutter, Andy and Luke, and starting up something new with them.
I remember that now. I do remember that.
And I had a lot of faithful people come to me and tell me. They understand this is the same week that Core died.
Yeah.
When he had committed suicide.
Yep.
And he was also involved with that behind-the-scenes stuff with Karen Clay. And people were coming to me and kind of telling me that there were some private meetings going on at someone's house regarding this takeover. And I'm like, you know what? At the same time, Luke was going to my students saying, listen, when I turn 18, I'm taking over the adult school. Will you stay if Chip's no longer here? Hey, dummy, every person told me. Everybody came running back to me and said, Chip, this is what's going down. This is what's being said. So I was just like, you know what? Buy the building. Come on in. I'll leave the chairs for you so I don't have to haul them back to the warehouse.
Right.
You can have it because it wasn't mine.
Right. You know, it's funny that you mentioned this. This is a pretty interesting flashback here because I remember, and if you won't drop names, I will because I don't really care. But I seem to recall Tommy DeRocco being the main guy with the whole Karen Clay thing, and I think that they did attempt to run a show, or they did run a show underneath the Karen Clay banner, and it bombed miserably. And then
wasn't that World of Hurt? Didn't they do it underneath World of Hurt?
No.
Okay.
No, I think World of Hurt already folded by that point.
He was living in our office.
Yeah.
He got kicked out of his house, and our old office, Andy's stink bomb cigarette room with all the computer for the music and everything, that was Tommy DeRocco's bedroom.
I remember the stink room there. I've had plenty of meetings there. If I recall correctly, that was the one where I was told that it's the story I like to tell here, and I don't know if you remember it, but stop me if you've heard it a million times. My favorite war story or story that I love to just tell because it's hysterical was there was a show that was actually wrestling Luke. Luke was the champion. He had some sort of back injury or whatever. He told me that I was going to go over for the title to get me up there. But then when I got up there, he switched it on me and said he was going to put himself over. He was going over, and then it was going to go up in a tournament, and it was going to go to Nick Paradise, a.k.a. Billy Jerkins at that time. But that show, I think it was Misery, that coordinated something or with a House of Battered and Abused Women. And a bunch of them showed up to that particular show. And I had a spot before intermission where Luke was cutting a promo, a quote-unquote emotional promo. I run in there, I had my old cane, and I smashed him in his knee, and I set the stage for the main event. And as I'm walking back, there's this girl who's just running me down. I hope you die, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just kind of, yucking it up, healing it up, whatever. She says, you suck. I turn around, follow it up with you swallow. Crowd was like, oh, and then she, jaw dropped, like in the cartoon, like, pow, right in the floor. And I said, you know how I know? I said, because that person right there, and I just pointed to some random person in the crowd, he told me. I walk back. I get called into that damn stink room, and what I find was that girl belonged to that House of Battered and Abused Women, and the person that I pointed out was the chaperone, and Luke told me, and I quote, they will no longer come to shows so long as JC Money is booked, so you cost us $200 a show. And I remember you being there and just having this look on your face, and at that point, that was the beginning of the end for me. That was the falling out for me. And the final nail in the coffin, this triggered this all back up, was when you mentioned how Luke was telling people when he turned 18, he was going to be, if Chip is not going to be here, he's still coming. He hit me up with that. He said, hey, business is going to be different in a bit, or when I turn 18, we're going to go legit and blah, 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 and, can you help run seminars and things like that? I was like, where's Chip? well, I don't know if Chip's going to be in line with our new direction or whatever. And I was like, well, if he's not there, I'm not. It's bad enough you're making everybody pay $10 to give us $5 back. Speaking of which, who came up with that asinine process?
It was all Andy.
Idiot.
I really didn't have a lot to do with, the training of the dudes, and he based it all on what the bills were coming in for the rent, the NIMO, and everything else, on what he had to try to do with the amount of people that were coming in, to train and to get work and so on and so forth. So it really wasn't much of a big, huge puzzle behind the scenes. It was just him taking everything and just butchering it out. You know what I mean? Did
you agree with that?
I'd be the first to tell you, I don't remember. I thought Misery didn't have anything to do with the battered women's shelter.
Oh, he didn't?
He used to run Vanderheiden Hall, which was a kids' school for troubled youth.
Okay, I got them mixed up.
So I don't remember who was other than Karen Clay or Tony Militia involved with them.
It might have been one of them, but I do remember it was the House of Battered and Abused Women. They wanted me to write an apology letter and everything, and I'm just like, dude, you came to a wrestling show. What do you expect? Stop the Violence may sponsor it, but it's professional wrestling.
So if you're an alcoholic, are you gonna make the Blue Cross Arena out in Rochester write a letter of apology for you because you had to go there and witness one of the sporting events, but yet saw somebody selling alcohol?
Exactly. So Chip Stetson joining us here on Talking Wrestling. And Chip, I hate to do this, but we got to take a quick time out here for a station identification. But when we come back, we'll touch up on UPW and get into the even better stuff. I like this. This is fun. By the way, the beer I'm drinking is great. So,
is it good?
Yes, I'll take a screenshot of it, send it to you. Maybe you want to give it a try. But we'll return in a few with Chip Stetson here on Talking Wrestling on the Gear Radio Network.
Sports news and fun. This is the Gear Radio Network.
Welcome back, everybody, and again, joining us here is Chip Stetson, and he's laughing over here. I'm watching him on Skype. He's laughing because his podcasting stuff is amazing.
My dad just walked by and gave me the crotch chop. Really?
How's it going, Papa Chip? I don't know if I met him. I remember I think I've met all your family at one point in time. How's it going, Papa Chip? Yeah, I remember you.
Oh, yeah.
You might. I don't know if you remember me or not. I'm a lot fatter than I was back then, but.
It doesn't matter who you are.
That's right. God bless you.
Hey, thanks for taking care of my kid for me.
Oh, he's taking care of me. He's the one that inspired me.
Yeah, JC Money had the dollar sign with the bling and everything. I'm rich. I'm wealthy. Did you know that was my sister that said that today? She started coining her own song?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I remember. I remember Kelly. She used to come there all the time.
My mom asked me about your gimmick too and everything. This is awesome. You could sit back and say, "Holy cow! Chip Stetson's parents gave me heat tonight."
Listen, greenies out there. If you want to be, you are not anything in this business until Chip Stetson's parents give you heat. That's right. I said it. All right. So let's 24/7. Wow, what a horrible flashback that was. But
yeah.
All right. So between the end of 24/7 and the time you made a return to Rochester, Rosario or Hellcat started up what is now known as UPW. We're talking 2003 here. Originally, it was under the moniker Kayfabe Dojo.
Yep.
They were running against, so to speak, Ian Decay, who was running RPW. They merged not too long after that. Incidentally, the first show was Kayfabe Dojo Youth Gone Wild, which is now at this point, I think this year will mark the 11th anniversary of that show come August. I was the very first match with Dickie Sanchez, and I was one of the first champions, along with Jason Atlas too. That's a little history lesson for you. So I am an alum. I am an alumni, despite the fact that I have not been there in a UPW ring in over 10 years.
Is it that long?
It's been quite a long time. But
don't worry, I was in it, and I've been rode hard and put away wet from it. So I'll take the blunt force of that one. Awesome.
But there was no Chip Stetson to be found at that time. It was 2003 to, I'd say, early 2000. I think I last wrestled when they had just become NWA Upstate, and that was in May. They became NWA licensed in April of 2004, I want to say. I'm just going off memory here. And in May of 2004, I wrestled my last match there. In that time frame, there was no Chip Stetson, and I was kind of surprised. Was that just, fate, or were you done with wrestling at that time? Where were you?
Well, I was there for the NWA, so I think your dates are a little bit off.
Might be.
I was there when I came back to Kayfabe Dojo. Hellcat had a back injury.
Yeah, that was about 3 months after I left.
Okay, I took time off because right after 24/7, that ring was so brutal. That ringside ring, it was like bumping on cement. My body was so shot.
It's funny. We mentioned that last week when I talked to Steve Cruz.
Yeah.
Mentioned how much I personally enjoyed bumping outside of the ring because it was carpeted and it was much softer than it was in the ring.
Well, so that we had like 5-inch thick judo mats underneath the carpeting, so that's why it was nice.
Yeah.
But my body was so shot, everything. And I'll be the first to tell you, my grandfather had passed away. I had a lot of Cora had died. Mm-hmm. A lot of the fun, what made wrestling fun for me, wasn't there.
Right.
And my knees were in so much pain. I needed time off. I really did. And then out of the blue, not realizing, and Hellcat had kept the show, everything going out in Rochester. Mm-hmm. He ended up getting hurt really bad. And that's when I ended up getting the phone call from him saying, listen, I don't know if you got the bug in you still. Because I hadn't talked to him. And you understand, like back then, we were like two peas in a pod. Mm-hmm. I pretty much fell off the earth for like 5 months there. And he asked me, he's like, listen, I got guys like Jimmy Olsen, Kevin Dunn, a lot of guys that are really, Huber Boy too.
We all know who that is, or should.
Yep. That were on their way up, and he really needed me to help him in a wrestling capacity to kind of like elevate.
Right.
And he asked me if I would come back, and I said sure. He goes, well, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm going to have you as a surprise. I don't even think Jimmy Olsen, because he was scheduled to wrestle Jimmy Olsen that night. I don't think Jimmy Olsen knew until I showed up to the building that it was me, because Mike was toying with a bunch of different stuff. And I've always been welcomed in that locker room ever since back in New Millennium. I mean, when I showed up with Debbie and my 11-year-old, he was in a stroller even at the time, barely over 1 year old.
Mm-hmm. I remember when he was born.
Yeah, it was like, oh my God, Chip's back. Good. You know what I mean? A lot of positive, very few negative, and the negative was just people that were worried about their spot.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm. It's just like,
it's usually how it goes.
And we'll talk about, for me, I don't have to be the main guy. And back in New Millennium, I was a main guy. I was one of the big four that people, and I was, like I said, I was supposed to be the one to help elevate people. I was never supposed to be a TV champion all those times or a tag team champion. I was just a guy that was supposed to come in and make people look good.
Right.
And I made a good career out of it. I'm not going to mistake it. I did. I got a lot of business that way. But he needed me to help get guys, and this is also Marcos. He was elevating up, so it's like I went right into a program with a bunch of guys that were ripe and ready, and Mike had started it, and unfortunately, he had gotten hurt with his back and needed help drastically. So that's when I came back. But that was actually before NWA.
Yeah, I remember I was irritated because at that point in time, very similar to how you lost your drive, I lost my drive, and I didn't leave NWA because of any other reason than a personal choice. We mentioned Core for a bit. Core was one of the few veteran presence in 24/7 that gave me my props. You were one of them too. You, Drake Evans, and Core were, and it was kind of like the fun crowd there. You know what I mean? And we had some fun. And so when Core committed suicide, it was Eric Everlast that told me that.
Yeah.
And it threw me off. And Eric and I, true story, were the only Rochesterians that went to his funeral.
Yep.
And that was a huge blow to me because I really looked up to him.
Yep.
And then 6 months later, a personal friend of mine that I went to high school with, that I was teaching how to bowl, took his life in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
And that was just, and I had given him a ticket. He was going to come to watch the show. I had a front row seat reserved for him, and he was going to come watch it because he wanted to see me wrestle and never got the chance to.
Yeah.
And so when I came back and I did that show, the first show, my heart really wasn't into it. Hellcat, to his credit, he probably doesn't remember this at all, but I'll never forget this. He let one chair in the front row stay empty for me, and I'll never forget that. But my heart wasn't into it. I ended up, getting into a BS argument with, I think it was Kevin Dunn. Got into a BS argument with him. It was just stupid crap. And I was just like, you know what? My heart's not in this. I left. And, of course, Dunn and I squashed it like a week later. But I left. So when you came back, I was happy that you were back, but I kind of had the vibe that Mike was pissed at me because I left. And I didn't... and then the other guys, RCW... came calling me about 7 months later, and I decided to go there and work there. And obviously, it was a different time back then. But I was happy that you were back. But in the same, I was sad that a guy that I looked up to was on the other camp, the enemy camp, so to speak. And at that time, it was like you don't talk to these people, you don't work there, you don't this, and it was like crap. Nowadays, I tell them to go F themselves, but. But, so, you were there when UPW, NWA Upstate really began to blossom. Yeah. Like, really was doing stuff. Like, as I was leaving, Mike had a vision. Yeah. And he was, booking Doring, and I think Shark Boy was at one of them earlier shows, and Abyss, I think, was at another one or something like that. So he started getting in these TNA guys, and then he starts bringing in a few more. And now, I mean, hell, you got headlocks and home runs coming up. You got a freaking all-star cast coming there. So, so take us through the growth part. When you walked in till really, essentially now, I mean, the growth.
Right. Well, you got to understand too. Like Mike Hellcat takes a lot of pride in home-growing his talent through the school. Mm-hmm. Okay, you were a product of that. So you got to understand, like when you say that Mike may have been mad, Mike was probably mad because the amount of time and effort that he put in trying to get you where he wanted you to be. Mm-hmm. And what did you do? You took the talent and you went elsewhere. Mm-hmm. No, not immediately, but you stopped. Momentum slows down. He now has what he thought he had in line for you is now going to have to go in another direction.
Right.
Erase the marker board. Start over again.
Yeah.
Nothing's worse than change. With having to change the plans of originally what. That's creative. You know what I mean? It's what Titan does every day of the week. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Of the month. It's a total change of plans. Now, granted, I'm old school, so my wrestling roots are going to go back to John Sullivan, which was Johnny Valiant, and Dominic DiNucci, the guy who trained me. So the morals and everything that I have on the way of looking at it is, if anybody leaves you for what you've taught them in a training school and takes their talents elsewhere, should be a blow to your heart. It should kill you. That somebody that you invested all that time and effort into left and took their talents elsewhere for somebody else to grow. I believe Hellcat has those same morals of, investing time in people, and then when things change and people leave, you get bitter. And you get upset that those persons have changed everything. So, do I think Hellcat... I never once, John, ever heard Hellcat say, F JC Money, that no good mother effer. Never.
I've heard him say that.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
He never said it to me.
I laugh at it now because, I've seen him, especially since I've stopped wrestling. I've seen him a few times, and I believe the hatchet is definitely buried. We shook hands and we shot the breeze, and when I saw him at and we'll get there too, Sully's funeral. When I saw him at Sully's funeral, I told him the same thing that I told everybody else, which is, if you need anything, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm here to talk. I know he's light years beyond me as far as the business is concerned, but that's just kind of my thing. Is I like to take care of within, as well. And regardless of whatever heat there was, especially during the next era years, where I was very instrumental in growing that place.
You were competition number one.
Yeah. But still, I mean, he when it boiled right down to it, he's a brother in the business. He was hurting, and I was there, and I think, I've seen him since then, and everything's been cool since then. So we haven't done business or anything, but that is what it is. But hearing your perspective from that, it makes sense to me.
Right. It's old school mentality. JC, and its purest form. It's the stuff, and maybe that's why I've been in for 18 years. I just turned 40 last week. Okay?
I said you turned 21 last week, man. Thanks for making me out to be a liar.
Come on now. You got to look at it this way: is for the amount of years that I've been, people could say that I've gotten the respect of my peers in the locker room for my work ethics. People could say that I've got the respect of the locker room for how long I've been around, and so many of them wrestling me and having no problem shooting back and working tight for being somebody older, but I've always demanded, you didn't have to like me, you don't have to like what I say, but I believe that from a business perspective, I've always acted professional and treated people the way that they would want to be treated, which I think got me the respect that I have today. People don't have to like me. I mean, I'm sure Terry Cadillac hates my guts.
You ain't the only one.
And ask me if I care.
No.
Do I think Sean Zimmer hates my... what's his... Is that
Keith
his name?
Zimmer.
Keith Zimmer, yeah, whatever his name is. He doesn't really matter.
No, he's a tool.
He's a tool. And
just like Aaron Hernandez killed people, exactly. Keith Zimmer is a tool.
Absolutely. And they don't make a difference. Did Dawn just give you heat for that?
No, she did not.
Okay, I was going to say if she did, that would be awesome.
Oh, she probably gave me heat, if anything, more for the Aaron Hernandez killed people comment.
Well, that's what I meant.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't give a damn about Keith Zimmer. Nobody does, but...
All right. Well, I'm hoping in a little while I'll get the chic out of you, but
Oh, if you want to, ask and you shall receive. You shall get a chic impression a little bit later on, probably before we close the call out here. But
if we could try to do it towards my dad, that would be sweet.
Okay.
Because he would pop from it, dude.
Would he?
Huge.
All right.
Oh, you freaking jabroni.
There's going to be a lot. I'll tell you what, if I start breaking into chic mode, and God help me, I'm sure I'm going to end up doing it at Pier 6 on June 8th, but if I start breaking into chic mode, I am probably going to start swearing. So there's going to be censors, but there would be. Yeah, I got the big thumbs up there.
Now, also on June 8th, isn't that the shoot fight of the century?
We'll see. We'll see about that. I don't attempt to make mention of particular fans' names, but yes, if it happens, Chip, I'm going to be the referee. All right, we're gonna take a quick. I'm sorry.
I can tell you one quick thing about that.
Okay.
I know Ash. I've seen Big Head.
Mm-hmm.
What will happen if that actually takes place and Jesse kicks his ass?
Dude, I swear to God, it will never let. I don't think Ash there's coming back from that, man. I don't know. I'll find out, and I will ask him that in 2 weeks because he's my guest in 2 weeks.
All right, literally, save that question. Like Chip Stetson wants to know if by some slim chance Jesse beats your ass. What are you gonna do? Is it just my dad just said nothing?
Oh my God, he'll probably get himself booked everywhere now. But all right.
Like, oh my God, that was a hell of a match.
I never, honest to God, I've been reading so many of these damn things, I didn't even think of the possibility of Jesse being able to whoop Ash's ass. But I always thought of it. And Ash is a friend of mine, and Ash, don't shoot on me online, you internet crusader. But I was going to call it the Sunday afternoon sissy fight, but I was going to ref it, though. I don't care. But all right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we will touch up on the things that you, the listening audience, want to listen to. I am sure we will talk the aforementioned ECPW and UW when we come back to Talking Wrestling here on the Gear Radio Network.
Salute.
Pier 6 Wrestling presents P6W Live, the TV taping for Saturday Night Shakedown, which airs on Rochester's CW16, Saturday nights at 1 a.m. Pier 6 Wrestling Live comes to you from the Italian American Community Center on 150 Frank Domino Way in Rochester, New York, Sunday, June 8th at 4 p.m. Tickets are $15 for general admission, $20 for front row, and kids 12 and under get in for $10. Just announced for the Tag Team Championships, the champions Punisher Van Slyke and Kevin the Man Graham take on the Electric Dream Machine, Studley Steve McKenzie, and Guerrero Loco. Already scheduled to appear, heavyweight champion Super Beast with Rob Sanderson, television champion Jordan Lennox, Young Guns champion Joe O'Connor, Jay Freddy, David Fenway, the return of JC Money, and many more. Visit them on Twitter at Pier 6 Wrestling and watch Pier 6 Wrestling Saturday Night Shakedown on CW Rochester Saturdays at 1 a.m. Be there! Wow, what an interview so far. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is more to come. We're going to have to split this off into 2 parts. Part 2 will air this weekend on the Gear Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed Part 1. And I must remind everybody that this is a copyrighted podcast of the Gear Radio Networks, and any rebroadcast or reproduction without the express written permission of Gear Radio Networks, or me specifically, is strictly prohibited. The executive producer is Mrs. Dawn Semino. Tune in later on this weekend. No later, I'm going to shoot for Friday, but tune in later for the conclusion to this interview with Chip Stetson here on the Gear Radio Network. Until then, this is JC Money saying so long, everybody. Good night now.